What if in every single situation in your life you had a button at your side that said stop and you could press it? That's an idea. There has also been a study I vaguely remember where people had to do something and they had a stop button. So group 1 had a stop button, group 2 didn't. So now what happened is that the group with the stop button was able to proceed longer in the task. Now, practical examples of this idea implemented. Whenever I fast, I just tell myself over and over again that I can press the stop button at any point in time. But if I continue, I just might well continue. But if I do want to stop, I can just press the stop button at any point in time. What this does for me is, if you are fasting, for example, and you have more and more cravings and you have more and more hunger, there are a lot of thoughts connected to this. But all of these thoughts can be just basically redirected to, I can stop at any point in time. So therefore, it's whenever you have one of these thoughts, it's a basically indirect redirect to the stop button, to, okay, I can quit. And what this also means for you is that the stop button is basically quitting this loop and then reaffirming that you have choice. Often, I at least catch myself thinking that if I now stick to this diet now, for example, or if I now stick to this very intense workout schedule where I train the same times maybe already, but I just now have 10% more. I just have a higher standard I have to adhere to. And every time then I catch myself thinking these thoughts of, if I do this, then I might be never able to do this, and maybe what happens if I then one day might not be able to do this, and what if the compounding effect is negative, and so on and so forth, so it will be harder and harder and harder and harder to do this. So what happens if all of these things exist? You just can press the stop button, the stop button, the stop button. It's just such an easy solution. It reaffirms every single time that you are the architect of your choices. What I also found is many of these meditations, also recently popularized by Andrew Huberman, the Reverie meditation. It's not called the Reverie meditation, but it actually is called, so there is an app that offers this. This app is called Reverie, but what Huberman calls it is either NSDR or Yoga Nidra. And I listened to one of these sessions, and what became kind of clear to me is that it basically treats your attention and is kind of turning your attention inwards toward the different parts of your body that you can feel and you can also control. And as you do this again, it is basically one big reaffirmation session that you are the one in control, even though that might not totally be true, and your body can basically tell you at any point in time to go into second sleep, where you just cannot access basically anything anymore because you're sleeping. But nevertheless, just you thinking you are in control is probably in the long term more efficient than the other way around. Another thing I tried is I tried a very weird sleeping schedule. And what is the one thing you do that is basically not doing anything at all? It's basically sleeping. Because you are not there anymore. Of course, you sometimes might awake in your dream, and you also might realize that you are awake in your dream, but that's not the point. The point is, the ultimate thing that you can do that is not doing things is basically just sitting still and your mind even going offline. So what I did is, throughout the day, so basically I slept 4 hours in a given night, which is very controversial and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, I wanted to try it. So I slept 4 hours in a given night, and I slept then the rest of the 4 hours in 20 minutes slots during a given day. And I placed these slots according to my sleep needs and also according to how drained I felt. So if I, for example, sat in the library and studied for 2 hours, at every point in time where I was like, oh yeah, and also I don't understand anything at all anymore what I read, and also this is so hard, and I don't like learning at all, and I would like to do something different, like go to the grocery store or talk with friends or go for a run and so on and so forth. I did have a stop button. I could just go to sleep for 20 minutes. Of course, it's kind of weird if you just sleep for 2 hours in the library, But for 10 or 20 minutes, just sitting there and like, is not that big of a deal, I think. And it's also, again, the principle of a stop button. I, as of this morning, realized that this might be something that is actually interesting, because it's a concept that I have heard years ago and I still have implemented in many parts of my life. The fasting being one, and whenever it works, I just realized this is something that really works. And what you also need to do, obviously, is you cannot just abuse the system. If you really want to press the stop button, and then you tell yourself over time, again and again and again, that the stop button is there, then eventually you will not believe so if your mind is basically, maybe you could just say your mind is basically a child and a grown-up. So the child is a little bit smaller and the grown-up is a little bit bigger. And the grown-up is the rational part of you, and the child is a more animal side of you that maybe has not a brain that is well developed and so on and so forth. So sometimes you need, so think of the child basically as an actual child, and think of you maybe as the actual adult in the room. And I think this is a very good idea. So if the child now wants to eat cookies, of course that's not really the best long-term thing the child can do. Therefore, the grown-up sometimes has to step in and say, you cannot eat cookies. But if now every time you want to access basically this thought pattern of eating cookies, and every time you say, so basically this is just a trick, the stop button is just a trick, as long as you actually don't allow yourself ever to press the stop button, but it turns into something that is actually real, also for the child, if it can press the stop button. The whole thing is based on the idea that you can press the stop button. But if over time you don't allow yourself ever to press the stop button, and if you prolong the gratification also just a little bit more and more and more and longer and longer and longer, then eventually the child will just not believe the adult anymore and say, this is bullshit. There is no stop button. And therefore, in order to reaffirm that the stop button is actually real, I think it makes sense to sometimes give in to the stop button, and therefore to not redirect these thoughts. Maybe to not redirect the cravings, for example, or to not redirect the studying and sleeping, and actually allow yourself maybe to sleep for 2 hours in a given day if you are really tired, for example, and if you just feel like you cannot do anything anymore. Or if you are at a workout at the gym and your heart rate is like 200 and you are like completely drained, maybe just allow yourself to stop, to maybe go into a position where you actually can rest, and you just allow yourself to maybe lie down for 10 minutes, which I often do actually during a workday, whenever I feel just that I am pushing myself too high and that my brain is basically over-processing and overworking, and I am becoming maybe jittery because of the adrenaline that is too much in my system. And then I just allow myself to calm myself a little bit down. Maybe with one of the different tools Huberman recommends, such as just varying the length of your inhaling and exhaling. And since this kind of connects to your autonomous, so basically not to the autonomous, but to the sympathetic and to the parasympathetic part of your nervous system. But the stop button works, I think. At least it works for me to some extent. But it only works, again, if you, as the adult, don't trick the child into working all day long, forever. But if it actually is a process that rewards both sides, because the child over time realizes that the adult might have something useful to say, but also the adult obviously needs the child in him, in her, in basically one itself, in order to come up with the best solution for the entire system. That might be your body, that might be your brain, but just the entire unit that is you.